when big news breaks.
It pains me to announce that I have no option but to resign from the office of Premier.
Reimpose Stage 3 stay-at-home restrictions effective from midnight tomorrow night.
6 News is there for you.
This was a scene of what some are describing as almost a riot, violent confrontations with police and protesters.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute coverage that's focused on the facts.
I just wrapped up a call with the Trump campaign.
The waters have begun receding in southeast Queensland now. The cleanup begins.
No matter the time.
Welcome to this 6 News major breaking news we have for you.
No matter the place.
Yes, sorry, I'm at the supermarket right now.
You'll always see it first right here on 6 News.
I guess I'll be your next member for Aston,
Labor's Mary Doyle defeats the Liberals in the federal Aston by-election, breaking a record that stood for more than 100 years. Chris Minns looks set to lead a minority government in New South Wales as counting continues in tight races across both Houses of Parliament. Donald Trump expected to appear before a judge within days, while also signalling he will continue to contest the 2024 presidential campaign. And Julian Assange's father welcomes news that Australia's High Commissioner to the UK will visit his son in prison, with calls to end what's been called an injustice. Good evening. Labor has made history overnight, with the party projected to win the federal by-election in the outer suburban Melbourne seat of Aston. The seat, formerly held by ex-minister Alan Tudge, is the first to go from an opposition to a government in more than 100 years. The result has led to some speculation on the future of Peter Dutton's leadership, with the Liberals now only holding 2 Melbourne electorates. National reporter Aston Pollock has more.
Yet another election and another Labor win, and a historic victory and another massive blow for the Liberals. The seat of Aston, located in Melbourne's outer suburbs, is now projected by 6 News to be picked up by Labor's Mary Doyle. Former Liberal strategist Tony Burry has labelled the result cataclysmically bad for the seemingly struggling party. It comes amid more and more controversies and troubles for the Liberals, led by Peter Dutton. Mary Doyle actually lost to retiring MP Alan Tudge last year in the federal election. The seat since 1990 has been held by the Liberal Party, and aforementioned the retiring member Alan Tudge, who was previously a senior minister in the Liberal governments, handed in his resignation in February of this year. And with around 80% of votes already counted, as of right now, we have seen around a 6.5% swing towards the ALP, and it is projected two-party preferred based on preference counts, Mary Doyle and the ALP on 54% versus Roshina Campbell and the Liberal Party on 46%. Now in the first preferences, Miss Doyle also leading on 42% versus Miss Campbell's 39%. In terms of the other candidates running for the Greens, it was a fairly average night, with candidate Angela De Camillo picking up just under 10% of the primary vote. Independent Mayor Testa with 7%, and Fusion Party's Owen Miller with 3%. And once that result was declared in favour of Mary Doyle, the Labor faithful certainly got amongst it, with Richard Marles introducing the newest member of the Albanese government.
Thank you so much, Richard. And what an excellent Deputy Prime Minister this proud Victorian is. I'm Mary Doyle. I'm a suburban mum, and I've lived in the outer eastern suburbs for more than 35 years. And as of tonight, I guess I'll be your next member for Aston, And this is the really big one. I can never say thank you enough to our excellent volunteers who gave up so much of their time their labour and their patience to make sure this area isn't taken for granted by the Liberal Party.
And shortly before that, Ms Campbell addressed her supporters with the opposition leader Peter Dutton joining her, him saying there's a lot of work ahead for the party.
Thank you to all of our workers. It's a tough night for the Liberal Party and for our family in the Liberal Party here in Victoria.
Thank you, Peter. And I want to thank the other candidates, Mary, Angelica, Maya and Owen, and to their supporters.
The last time a government defeated an opposition at a federal by-election was over 100 years ago, in 1920, when Labor MP Hugh Mayon was expelled from the House of Representatives through a motion from then PM Billy Hughes after criticising British policy in Ireland. That election in Kalgoorlie was won by the nationalist George Foley. Now, in general, most by-elections are retained by the incumbent party in that particular seat. The Liberals now only hold 2 federal seats in Melbourne, Deakin and Menzies, both retained at the 2022 federal election. Counting will continue in Aston to determine the official final results.
And reaction from the Labor Party continues to pour in tonight. Treasurer Jim Chalmers described the result as absolutely phenomenal, saying the result is stunning and he's really looking forward to working with incoming MP Mary Doyle. Climate Change and Energy Minister Chris Bowen described Doyle as a Labor hero, tweeting that no government has won a by-election off an opposition for 103 years until tonight. And now our work for the Australian people continues. Labor MP Sally Sito also described Doyle as a legend. Member for Higgins, Michelle Leonardo called the result outstanding. And the South Australia Labor Party also offered their congratulations to their Victorian colleagues. To the latest out of the ongoing New South Wales election count now, and new Premier Chris Minns looks set to lead a minority government, with counting continuing in a number of tight races across both Houses of Parliament. 3 independent MPs have already said they will provide confidence and supply for the new government. Even without a majority, Labor is still now in government in every single state and territory, Tasmania being the only exception. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is in Hobart for the 120th anniversary of the Tasmania Labor Party, saying the best results will always be achieved when it's a federal Labor government working with a state Labor government. The Prime Minister has also praised state opposition leader Rebecca White for standing up to Conservative governments. Chief anchor Leo Puglisi has the latest from Launceston.
Tasmania is the unique thing in Australian politics right now, being the only state and territory, and of course federal as well, that is not a Labor government right now. 2021 was when Tasmanians last voted, at least in the lower house. Of course, you do have upper house elections since then. The Liberals had a small swing away from them, about 1.5, but overall on the primary vote, 48.72%. That's compared with 28.2% for Labor. Labor, of course, last in government here back in 2014. At times they were in an alliance with the Greens as well. Greens had ministers here. But of course, you know, compared to other states, different electoral system here. You've got Hare-Clark, which of course makes things a little bit different. You have 5 electorates in the lower house with multiple members, all, by the way, which have the same names as the federal lower house electorate. So, you know, you've got Bass, you've got Braddon, etc., etc. So that happened in 2021, and you had Peter Gutwin. He was re-elected then with a very slim majority. Jeremy Rockcliffe, of course, is the Premier now, following Gutwin's resignation. But some did believe this translated into the federal results, because we saw last year, it's been just under a year since that federal election, the Liberals in Tasmania had a swing towards them of 2.31%. Labor swing away 6.35%, which of course was a really interesting outcome for them. And of course in Tasmania you have an MP like here in Launceston, the member for Bass, who's Bridget Archer, pretty well-known Liberal backbench across the floor multiple times, both under the Morrison government and as a current opposition MP, and she's well considered a moderate. And some people did ask, you know, is that why, or at least did it contribute to her being re-elected, having that moderate stance, and also, you know, as I said, crossing the floor repeatedly. Of course, this might not exactly be the worst situation for the Liberals in terms of the amount of places they're in government in recent years. You have to go back to 2008, before September 2008, when the WA election saw the Liberals win. Before then, in 2008, 2008. Labor was in government, every state and territory, including Tasmania, and also federally with Kevin Rudd. That, was when you had people like Campbell Newman, the Lord Mayor in Brisbane. He was considered the top Liberal in the country. Of course, he later became the LNP Queensland Premier. The other interesting thing, of course, to note here is what happens with coalition government. You have a coalition government in the ACT with Labor and the Greens. You, of course, have not a coalition, but there is a minority government in New South Wales based on those results we've seen over the weekend. Of course, counting, still not finished there. But what's happening with the Nationals and what is happening with them is they are no longer in government anywhere in Australia. The Greens are in government, at least partially, but not the Nationals anywhere, which is an interesting situation. The party doesn't have much of a presence here in Tasmania. They pop up occasionally. Steve Martin was a recent senator for them after he defected from the Jackie Lambie network. But the Nationals certainly in a bit of an interesting situation across the country. They've got opposition status in WA, barely any presence in South Australia. They emerged in Queensland. They don't really exist in the ACT, which is, of course, an interesting situation for what is considered a major party that at times, even in swings away from their partners in the Liberal Party, haven't done too poorly, I should say, reflected federally at the recent New South Wales and Victorian elections as well.
The results in the New South Wales Upper House also appear tight. Labor could pick up 9 seats out of the 21 up for grabs at this election, while legalised cannabis and the Liberal Democrats are likely to enter the New South Wales Parliament for the first time. 6 News Law and Government editor Stuart Jeffrey has the latest developments.
It is certainly people have voted. It is democratically elected government. I will say probably the biggest concern I've heard raised about that is that because all the governments, except for Tasmania, of course, are from the same party, and of course, because Tasmania is only a 1-seat government there, 13 of 25 for the Liberal Party, so they are pretty close. So, if one MP changes party or whatever, the Liberals will lose their government there. So, I guess the issue that I've heard discussed, and this is going into a bit more of the legal circles that I move in, is that because state governments can refer to the federal government certain powers to do certain things that aren't in the Constitution, there's potentially risks there when all the governments are from the same party. We could see a growth in federal power. Of course, that is there's no consensus on that, of course. And even though Tasmania is a narrow Liberal government, it still is a Liberal government. So there's some merit to that argument, but whether or not it's 100% true, I haven't made up my mind yet.
Of course, there are no more elections in the state, territory or federal level. There is a referendum, though, anyway, this year. Next year, we've got the NT, the ACT and Queensland. Now, the ACT, it's hard enough for Liberals to pick up anyway, but the NT and Queensland are going to be really interesting. You're in Queensland. Do you think Anastasia Palaszczuk, after it'll be 9 years, would be able to last, given seems the big issues right now, of course, crime. And, 6 News had David Christofouli on only a few weeks ago, and he's practically already started next year's campaign.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard on people on the streets, there is a lot of opposition to Palaszczuk. She will have been in power for, 3 terms, I believe, then. Some of those terms 4 years, some of them 3 years, so it's not 100% there. Having said that, however, she does have a sizable majority there, so we certainly could see the Liberals come back, potentially see other resurgent parties. I know One Nation had a bit of success there at a federal level back in last year. I have had a lot of people on the street being upset, but I recognise that I live in Toowoomba, City, so Conservative, we voted against same-sex marriage at the plebiscite. So I do recognise that, although I'm hearing lots of complaints, it is a biased audience per se.
And just on the New South Wales, just again, of course, we mentioned the balance of power in the upper house should be really interesting, because you just look at the 21 out of 42 elected this election. You have One Nation, you have the Liberal Democrats notably, but then on the other side of things, you've got legalised cannabis with Jeremy Buckingham controversially. Shooters Fish is also getting an animal justice a bit shaky right now about whether they'll get in or not. But that could be a really interesting mix up there. It seems like almost a 50-50 left-right split in the crossbench.
And of course, if the AJP doesn't get it, then we're probably looking at the figures right now. potentially you could see Elizabeth Farrelly Independents take up that seat. Of course, Elizabeth Farrelly there. So no matter what, he's still going to have someone who's more, I want to say, left-wing on the political spectrum in government. So definitely it is a pretty balanced upper house. I know, for example, that if you look at some legalised candidates is getting happy with the result, of course, their candidate being a former Greens MP could create tension there. Stuart Summers Fisher's, whether or not that candidate even stays in the party is still up for debate, given their poor record in the lower house. Of course, they lost all three of their former seats, which are now held by independents who were formerly from the party. We also have Liberal Democrats. They got a seat, so that's good for them. However, One Nation, where they ran with Mark Latham with the intention, of course, of getting 2 MPs elected, that failed. So only 1 seat picked up there by One Nation, giving them a total of 3. Of course, they can fill Latham's old seat with another MP, but that still only gives them the 3 seats, not the 4 they were looking for. So certainly some wins and some losses there from either side.
Should we discount the Greens potentially getting a third at this election, though? I mean, I know they were pushing hard for Linda June Coe, who's third on the ticket to get in. Are they still in with a bit of a chance? Maybe they could get that AJP seat instead of EFI?
Looking at the figures right now, I doubt it. Of course, the AJP seat is looking pretty solid. At the current figures we have, AJP is at 0.46% of the quota, whereas Fairly Independence is 0.28. Green sitting at 1.96 means they're unlikely to take that, to cover that gap and pick up that remaining seat, especially given that they've had a swing against them of almost 1% in the upper house. So, of course, given that, I think it's unlikely that we'll see the Greens get that 3rd seat.
Heading overseas, Donald Trump is expected to appear before a judge within days, while also signalling he will continue to contest the 2024 presidential campaign. Reports indicate the former US president will be in court on Tuesday and fingerprinted, though he will not be in handcuffs, and it's not clear whether he will be forced to pose for a mugshot. It's also been reported he is facing 34 counts, which also includes at least 1 felony offence, and he will plead not guilty. It's understood he will still contest the Republican Party nomination for the 2024 presidential election. Only several weeks ago, Trump claimed that illegal leaks from District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office suggested he would be taken into custody in coming days, which did not immediately happen.
A lot of people obviously are saying it could have an impact, but that it might go the other way, that he would almost like, and that his campaign team would almost see it as a benefit that he could be the victim in this, case, that he could kind of play the victim, and that he could use, the argument that the so-called establishment is coming after him. And you've already seen that from a lot of his campaign team. You've heard a bunch of his spokespeople doing TV, radio, etc., arguing that claim. So, as much as, they're claiming to not like this, it very much brings publicity to their campaign, and it very much brings a sense of, public reaction to their campaign. You started to see, a level of interest per se in Donald Trump going down. He wasn't necessarily in the news as much. He wasn't the president anymore. He was running for president again in 2024, but there wasn't really a lot of things that were, turning people to look towards his campaign. Whereas this is now the former president of the United States indicted, possibly arrested, coming Tuesday. So there is a lot on that front. And so I guess when looking at it, it's not really going to impact his campaign in a very negative way. You have House Speaker Kevin McCarthy claiming that, Alvin Bragg, that's the name of the district attorney, is in some way trying to interfere in a presidential election. But all of these claims that these Republicans are making, they're not really backing it up with evidence. Yes, the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, is a Democrat. District attorneys are elected. But at the same time, in a nature and in a matter of this nature, indicting a former president, potentially arresting a former president, that is, something that people cannot take lightly. And also, it's not Alvin Bragg making this decision in its entirety. It's the grand jury. It's a combination of other factors. So again, not really a lot to argue on the politicization aspect of things. But even if that's true, Republicans will still try to make that claim.
Multiple people are dead after tornadoes hit several US states. Officials have described scenes in Arkansas and Illinois as total destruction following last week's storms that also brought twisters. At least one person died after a theatre roof collapsed during a heavy metal gig. Dozens are believed to be injured across the states, but the exact number remains unclear. Pope Francis has joked that he's still alive after leaving hospital late last night. The 86-year-old was taken to hospital earlier in the week after complaining of breathing difficulties. He was treated for bronchitis and is believed to be responding well to antibiotics. As he was driven away while waving to well-wishers, he said he wasn't frightened during the stay. Julian Assange's father has welcomed news that Australia's High Commissioner to the UK will visit his son in prison. John Shipton says Stephen Smith visiting Assange in Belmarsh prison will provide an opportunity for him to see the appalling conditions his son is kept in, adding that it is especially heartbreaking on my daughter-in-law Stella and two young grandchildren Gabriel and Max. It could and should end right now. Mr. Smith says his primary responsibility will be to ensure his health and well-being and to inquire as to his state and whether there is anything that we can do. Well, last month, 6 News explored the 2-year anniversary of Labor's landslide win in Western Australia when they picked up both houses of Parliament, essentially giving them total control. At the time, no Labor MPs were available for comment. Now David Templeman, the State Minister for Culture and the Arts, is speaking to our partners at WAMN News and answering our questions about what the McGowan government has done halfway through their second term.
I think we recognise very importantly that with a large majority comes a responsibility to ensure that both the legislation that's introduced is debated appropriately, but also that there is genuine reform. And we've made some genuine reforms in terms of our electoral system, making sure that our upper house is now a much fairer place and more representative, and so we'll see those changes at the next election. But look, the other thing we've done is make sure that we report to the people of Western Australia through the Parliament the achievements of government and their focus points. So there's still important legislation to come, firearms legislation, for example, making sure that Western Australia is an even more safer place. A lot of investment in terms of tourism and attraction of money. In my own portfolio area of international education, a record amount of money budgeted for to attract international students. They're an important part of our economy, but they're also an important part of our economy in terms of providing employment opportunities too. At the end of the day, people make the decisions. West Australians make the decisions, and they'll make a decision again in a few years' time, in 2025. What I think we'll present to them is a track record of achievement, a track record of good hard work, and a track record that's focused on the important things that people believe are important for the state to prosper.
And you can watch McGowan's Majority 2 years on demand on the 6 News YouTube channel right now, or visit our website, SIXNewsAU.com. And now here's Ivan and Melly in Perth with a look at what's making news right now on WAMN News.
Tonight on WAMN News, 4-day work week for nurses and midwives. Union's official verdict on whether it will make WA public health system better. A WAMN News exclusive.
2 years on and still feeling the pain, Ashwari's parents commemorate the beloved daughter.
Direct flight between Jakarta and Perth launched this week, proving WA is open to tourism in a post-pandemic world.
Slow progress, why flood-damaged bridges won't be completely fixed until next year, and later Dr. Andrew Miller's comment. Join us tonight on the WAMN News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Thank you to both Ivan and Melly there. Now to tomorrow's forecast right across the country. Brisbane, partly cloudy, 26 degrees. Showers expected in Sydney, 21. Also 21, but no rain in Canberra. Up slightly to 23 in Melbourne, 19 in Hobart. Adelaide, it'll be 23. 28 and rain in Alice Springs, 26 and sunny in Perth, and in Darwin, a warm but wet top of 32. A reminder of the top stories we're following on 6 News this hour. And Labor has made history overnight, with the party projected to win the federal by-election in the outer suburban Melbourne seat of Aston. The seat is the first to go from an opposition to a government in more than 100 years. And New South Wales Premier Chris Minns now looks set to lead a minority government, with counting continuing in a number of tight races across both the Houses of Parliament. 3 independent MPs have already said they will provide confidence and supply. And that is 6 News for this hour. There's more news 24/7 on our website, SIXNewsAU.com, and on social media, just search 6NewsAU to find us. More news coverage continues right after this. For now though, I'm Connor Alforque. Thanks for your company. Good night.
When big news breaks,
It pains me to announce that I have no option but to resign from the office of Premier.
Reimpose stage 3 stay-at-home restrictions effective from midnight tomorrow night.
6 News is there for you.
This was a scene of what some are describing as almost a violent confrontations with police and protesters.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute coverage that's focused on the facts.
I just wrapped up a call with the Trump campaign.
The waters have begun receding in southeast Queensland now. The cleanup begins.
No matter the time.
Welcome to this 6 News major breaking news we have for you.
No matter the place.
Yeah, sorry, I'm at the supermarket right now.
You'll always see it first right here on 6 News.
If you are elected as Prime Minister, can you promise to own up to mistakes and factual inaccuracies if you make them? And would you be willing to come back on 6 News?
I certainly would. That would be a pleasure. And I think we've seen during the campaign, I made a mistake. I fessed up to it, said it was a mistake, didn't try to blame someone else. I think that's really important. With the high office of Prime Minister comes responsibility. And one of my concerns is that this Prime Minister never accepts responsibility, always seeks to blame someone else. And we can do much better than that.
All right, we'll leave it there. Opposition Leader Anthony Albanese, thanks so much for your time and for joining us here on 6 News.
Oh, thanks for having me on the program on 6 News, and I wish you all the best. And I commit to coming back on at semi-regular intervals. I think is a fantastic initiative, and thanks for spending the time with me today.